Tuesday of every month here at the Yale Club. It's an in-person audience along with a virtual audience. So thank you for joining us. I always like to say that the room that we're in now, we're on the 18th floor, the council room on the 18th floor. This is the birthplace of YANA. Back in January 2011, a group of alums got together in this room and we challenged each other and we posed the question, what would happen if the Yale alumni that were in the social purpose space got together, organized, and leveraged that community for the greater good? You fast forward 14 years, here we are. I think we have something like 8,000 followers. We have our first paid executive director, Kristen Urquiza, who will say a few words tonight. I think we have 10 chapters. And you're going to hear about one of our flagship programs tonight, the YANA-Dwight Hall Fellowship. And I'm not going to introduce the Dwight Hall people, but I will introduce the YANA board member who will be facilitating that conversation. Lisa Rieger. Lisa is a longtime YANA board member. She was our interim executive director before Kristen was hired. And she's got a long and distinguished career in social impact. I do want to say that if you're so moved to support the Dwight Hall Fellowship, just go to our YANA website. It's yale.community, and you'll find an easy way to give. Okay, so having said that, let me turn it over now to Lisa Rieger.
Hey, it's a real privilege to have Peter and Mark and Hamid here with us today, and all of you. As Ken said, the YANA-Dwight Hall Fellowship has been really one of the flagship programs for YANA. It's a really wonderful way for YANA members to engage and help create pathways for students at Yale to go into social impact careers. There are not as many pathways to do that as there are for consulting and finance and law and medicine. So it's a really important thing we're doing to help cultivate, working with Dwight Hall and others on campus. So I'm not going to talk anymore because we're going to have they're going to all talk about the fellowship in general. And then we'll have some conversation and questions and any questions from you. But definitely be thinking about, and we'd like to include you in ways that we can engage you into this incredible opportunity for students and alums. So, do you want to launch it off here? But this is Peter Crumlish, he's the director of Dwight Hall, and Mark Fabiano, who is the director of all of the fellowships, and Hamid, who is one of our YANA-Dwight Hall fellows from last year.
Thank you. So I started in this role as the executive director and general secretary of Dwight Hall in 2013. And early on, I met Ken, and we were interested in how our work was very closely aligned, or certainly our aspirations. And the history of the fellowship, the partnership, was really one of us looking at what was lacking or what was not available for students, specifically to help guide them and support them toward either careers in the public sector, social impact, or philanthropy or board service, or just being somebody who has a civic-minded ethos around the work that they're doing. So to back up a little bit, so Dwight Hall has been an independent organization affiliated with Yale since the 1800s, since 1886, when it was formed, when it was established as a building on campus, student-run center. We were incorporated as a nonprofit in 1898. Our articles of association are handwritten copper plate. So we actually predate a lot of current IRS laws around tax-exempt entities. In 1968, Dwight Hall launched the Summer Fellows. It was called the Summer Project. And what was notable about it is that it was assigned to a grad student at the time, David Warren, who was doing a joint degree at the Divinity School and School of Architecture and Urban Planning. And the challenge was in the context of 1968 in New Haven or cities in America, you can imagine what are we doing as students partnering with communities in New Haven that's really serving their needs. And what was revolutionary about the project in 1968 was that David really encouraged students to kind of flip the model. And rather than saying because we're privileged people, we're going to go out into New Haven and help needy people. They said, what is it that's going on in New Haven that their communities are already addressing in creative ways? What knowledge can we learn from them? And how can some Yaleys rolling up their sleeves, working alongside community members, do some good? And what can they learn about that in the process? So in our archives, we have the reports and feedback. And it's really funny to read, 20-year-olds in 1968 language talking about, cat and this and that, the language is really, really sweet. But they were really very intentional about wanting to kind of change that model. And as you probably know, that's kind of the standard approach of civic engagement, community engagement across campuses today. But it really was in that context that we started. The YANA-Dwight Hall Fellowship came about because we were looking at ways in which this amazing collection of this network of Yaleys who shared these values could support the next sort of generation coming up, provide leadership, guidance, mentorship, really modeling what a Yale degree can enable you to do that has an impact on the greater good. And mostly what we were looking at is, and Mark can get into the details of this because he spent most of the last decade kind of really understanding the complexity of working within an institution like Yale. Where is it not working? What are the impediments? And we've adapted from the original model. The YANA-Dwight Hall Fellowship has really changed. One of the big changes was that Yale created the Summer Experience Award, which is available to any student for one opportunity if they're on financial aid, if they receive financial aid. And that had been actually one of the original things we were addressing with the YANA Fellowship. And so we had to pivot. And that was good because we can't take credit for the fact that Yale got wise and realized that there was this need here, but it was an example of how people working creatively and contributing on their own piloted something that Yale ended up filling. So the history, I think, has been really iterative in a way that's impressive. The main thing that we're looking at long term is when you look at what Yale calls the destination data, which is the data of where Yale students go for careers after they graduate. Yale also collects destination data 5 years out and 10 years out, and they really want to see where students landing. Not surprisingly, the vast majority of students, the largest percentage, I should say, is finance and consulting, followed by professional schools or graduate work, which is entirely appropriate, and Teach for America is still the largest destination. Nowhere is there really strong representation of the social sector. We know students do go in that direction, but we know that Yale is happy when that happens. But we also know that Yale isn't really doing anything about those numbers. They're sort of agnostic about that, and we're not agnostic about that. We exist because we want to encourage students to take their amazing opportunity, their Yale education, and do good in the world. And that can either be in the very traditional nonprofit, government, public sector role, or it could be bringing your experiences of working with communities and serving society to whatever sector you're working in, whether it's law or finance or corporate America. And we're convinced that these summer experiences, these fellowships, are one of the most instrumental ways of influencing that for a couple of reasons. One is that going back to 1968, one of the core elements of the Summer Fellowship was a habit and a practice of critical reflection, which is built into everything that we do at Dwight Hall, but particularly the fellowships lend themselves to that. Before you begin your experience and every week throughout the experience, students are encouraged to reflect on what they're experiencing and really make their growth and their learning visible to them. And we do that in a group way. So everyone's sharing their experiences with the coordinators of the group and also staff are reviewing it. And a lot of the data that we collect, the qualitative data that we collect is really pretty impressive in demonstrating the high impact of these experiences on the students, where they end up, how their understanding of their purpose, the value, even just the way in which they perceive the work that they're doing. One good example of it was a student who was working in a fellowship in public mental health, said the biggest thing that she took away from this was the importance of, when you enter a room, seeing the humanity of the person first before anything else in the clinical setting. Understanding that fundamentally it's a human interacting with a human. And then there's a clinical aspect to it. And she said, as someone who's interested in going into medicine, that's something I will take with me for the rest of my life. And I felt like that's exactly what purpose is. So critical reflections is a really key element, and doesn't exist in the other fellowships at Yale. It's not to say that they don't have their own qualities, but the intentionality of having something like that as a component in the experience is one of the things that is leading to these outcomes. The other thing is looking at, from the student's experience, what are the barriers that they're encountering? And if you think about it, from the moment they arrive on campus, what are the barriers? Well, one is that there's so much available at Yale. Navigating way through it, it can be overwhelming. So having people who are available you can walk into the door and they'll stop what they're doing and sit down and talk with you and give you direction is really crucial. We also host a series of panels at lunchtime that are open to anybody to come in, grab a sandwich and listen to a panel of Yale alumni on different topics, often different career sectors or different experiences, international NGO work or public health or law, just to try to spark the imagination of students. A lot of students come to Yale with a fairly fixed number of ideas what they can do to be successful. And just by hearing from Yale graduates about what they're doing, opens up all kinds of possibilities for them. So as you can see, we're sort of systematically trying to work against this hidden hand that's pushing people toward sort of the easy careers. Then the really big thing is making sure that these opportunities exist. That if a student is inspired and wants to do something and they apply for funding, that they can get funded, particularly if they've used their summer experience award, which is only good for one time, and they want to pursue something even more. Providing other opportunities for people to continue to do that is really crucial. And then I think the last part of it is then sort of graduating into this network that exists of YANA, of all these other people who share these values, who are working in different areas around it and are all united by this intentional concern for finding opportunities to be of service in your life and your work, and holding those values in a way so that 10 or 20 years from now, when life is throwing everything at you, or an election comes and the way you understand the way your country's heading, whatever it may be, doesn't overwhelm you to the point where you say, I'm going to give up. That you still feel that it matters to be someone who's caring for the greater good and finding ways to be involved in it. And I think that's really the strength that YANA has at its core, is that community that can hold people to these values. I'm gonna stop there because I could talk on and on about this. So would you two want to talk a little
Sure.
bit more
Mind if I-
specifically about
Sure.
how it works?
So my name again is Mark. My last name is Fopiano. My title with Dwight Hall is Director of Programming and Evaluation. I joined Dwight Hall in 2014, so a little bit after Peter. I have a background. I'm from Ohio originally. I went to Providence College, year of AmeriCorps, and then I got a social work degree at Columbia, and then a few years in New York. So in my role, one of the things that I help oversee fellowships. I don't like to say that I run fellowships. I like to oversee things. I always tell people that the best part of my job is saying yes to motivated Yale students who want to do some form of work. But it's really about how do we create the environment for that thing to happen. So I think it might be helpful to just sort of paint the picture of what fellowships and funding, particularly for a summer, looks like for a Yale student. And Hamida, you can check me on any of this, and how we kind of build our experience into this, and kind of where we are intentional about that funding. So I sort of think of this in waves. There is a full funding application. There's an office, fellowships office, that is very generous with funding. It is particularly helpful to go to that office with an idea of what you want to be able to do. There's a lot of resources to figure out, okay, how can I make this work? So there's a common application deadline that's coming up, I believe Monday. March 3rd is the upcoming general deadline that people can apply for. Dwight Hall and YANA-Dwight Hall Summer Fellows is also on March 3rd, but we have our own application because we are looking for a different set of information that comes in. So if I'm a student and I have this idea of something that I want to do or a relationship that I want to capitalize on, I might start with the fellowships office. Typically, you would also be pointed to Dwight Hall or maybe to your residential college to try to figure out, well, what are these different pockets that exist? If you aren't able to secure something, Peter referenced something called the Summer Experience Award, which is a one-time deal that any student that is receiving any need-based financial aid, 1% to 100%, can get $4,000 in a non-competitive environment. So you're eligible if you receive financial aid, and you can get $4,000. There's as many as, I think, 500 students in a given year that will take advantage of that, which is proof to me that there are a lot of students that want to take part in nonprofit, in social sector work. I should say, by the way, that the SEA is only for social sector work. It is not for anything in the for-profit sector. It does cover arts, it covers all sorts of things, but it is strictly not for for-profit. That's incredible. That's a wonderful resource. It's also very, very late in the sort of timeline of summer planning. That's usually around a May 1st application. But if you're a student and you're on financial aid, this is the one time that you can use it. You struck out with other spots, and then you say, okay, well, I can still use this thing and get $4,000 to do it. That's amazing. Our role inside of this is, particularly for YANA, is we accept applications to come in. I have a very specific criteria that I look for. We have reviewers that read them blind. YANA will join us for the students that qualify. The really big qualification for working with YANA-Dwight Hall Summer Fellows is that you have used the SEA previously, or you are no longer eligible to use it, meaning you're a graduating senior. So what that is students who have either been involved in social sector work and have used the SEA and generally are running out of options. So while Yale is very generous with the amount of funding, and while alums are very generous with things that can get set up through the fellowships office, there is a large number of students that can't access that funding just because of the definition of how fellowship funding works. So specifically, YANA-Dwight Hall Summer Fellows only serves the students that have already used the SEA. So you could use it in your first year. Tons of students used it during COVID. I have a feeling that this is going to be a big year just because of transitions that might be happening and uncertainty with funding kind of across the country. So students might be looking for a later deadline to come in. So it'll be very interesting to see what happens with applications this year. And that's the population of students that we're looking to support. So in a given year, we accept these applications, we read through them, we grade them, we have interviews, and we make selections partially based, and this is always a fluent conversation between YANA and Dwight Hall, partially based on who the student is and the strength of their application, but also how can we potentially serve that person when they're coming in? So what natural connections can we make for that person? And how can we support the work that they're doing? I do want to also say that what is a bit different about our fellowship program from any other one, including the SEA, is Peter covered the emphasis on critical reflection. We have a 4-part series coming in of it runs a gamut from how do you prepare yourself to enter into a community from a values-based perspective. We go over the nonprofit sector, the social sector, very generally speaking. We typically will have one session about mentorship as well. So we want people to build their professional and personal networks throughout the course of the summer. We will always do that. That's going to be open to any student. For our summer fellows, we also ask that they write a weekly reflection in an ongoing, so every week, every Friday, I will send you a reminder. I want to know what's happening. There's not a lot of other places at Yale that sort of insist on you telling what's happening on the ground on a regular basis. If there is something that is amiss, it can be a conversation between us about how do you advocate for yourself within your placement? How can you process this, whatever that thing looks like? So we just want to be sort of a resource for students at any given time. And we want to know what's happening on a routine basis. The last thing that I'll throw in there, just thinking about changes that we've made in our own flexibility. I think that the Summer Experience Award, while generous and lots of students take advantage of it, $4,000 is maybe not enough, depending on what your plans are for the summer. If you're coming to New York City and you're going to be here for 2.5 months, and you don't have a place to stay, I'm not sure that that's a financially wise decision for students to make. We had a little bit of a wild idea last year for something that we call supplemental funding. This gets a little bit technical, but within the SEA rules, you are allowed to receive some additional amount of money, this year up to $2,000 more, but no more than that. If you receive more than $2,000, you're theoretically supposed to give your stipend back, which I can't imagine that happening. But that's a big difference for some students. And we said, okay, if you are going to go to wherever you're going to go to, and you have been awarded $4,000, but you really need $6,000, Dwight Hall can be the entity with YANA's support to kind of top up that person, to get them from a summer that they're not really sure if they should have that experience to being able to more comfortably, I wouldn't say comfortably, but being able to have that experience for themselves. So for us, we have 2 different sort of students that we look at. One is a group of students that we fully fund, that we fund the full amount. We won't partially fund the amount that students are asking for. And then the second group is what we call supplemental funding. And those are students that have already been funded, but are underfunded compared to what their need is.
And that's specifically one of the ways that we're trying to intervene, so that if a student can't do something that could have led to them having a real life-changing outcome, we're figuring out how to make sure that they can.
The last little bits that I'll cover is at the end of the summer experience, we always ask for a longer reflection. This we don't put kind of a time crunch on. There's 2 parts to it. One is a project reflection. I want to know what's the results, what's the deliverables, if there were those, what did you actually do substantively? And then I also want you to reflect personally on how have you grown or developed. So there are 2 parts to it. It's very simple. There's only a couple of questions. At the end of it, I always ask students, how has your philosophy of service or your approach to service changed over the course of this summer? And there's some very profound answers that are inside of there. And I don't know that students are oftentimes asked that type of question, but that's my favorite thing to read. So that's the big part. And then from wearing my evaluation hat, we have a small N, but all signs are that summer fellows are incredibly positive, not just in the this was a good experience kind of thing, but in the long-term trajectory, that having this experience was something that was the first step towards me choosing the career that I'm currently in. So it's always kind of encouraging to see it borne out in the data. So that's something that will continue to grow as we go here. But it's incredible. So I like my thanks to you guys. But I'll also introduce Hamida, who was a summer fellow with us last summer as a supplementally funded student, and is also a current senior. So if there are any people that are interested in talking to Yale seniors who might be, looking for a job.
Please. Thank you so much, Mark, for the introduction, and everyone else here, thank you for attending. I am Hamida Ulumi. I'm studying political science at Yale. I'm actually a transfer student from a community college in Los Angeles. So this is my second and last year at Yale, which is really sad. Wish I had more time here. I was an intern for YANA-Dwight, which is a very close partner of Dwight Hall. And the funny thing is, when I first came to Yale, like you said, there's such an abundance of resources. It's actually insane. I had no idea where to start. And one of the first places that I actually saw was Dwight Hall and the YANA program. And I had no idea about the fellowship website until like last semester, but I knew so much about Dwight Hall. And what Dwight Hall offered me was not that my internship was such a great thing. It's or like I needed housing or I needed food. It was the fact that it appreciated my work. And I feel like a lot of people don't understand, especially I was running an ESL program, and people who have experience with teaching English as a second language to especially older clients. I don't think people understand the amount of mental strain it takes to teach someone English who has never attended school before. I grew up with a mom who didn't attend school. She was a child bride. I was born and raised in Afghanistan, came to the US in 2016. I grew up with a mother who didn't speak English, who never attended school, and teaching her English was a full-time job. It really was a full-time job. And it's a burden that falls not just on the mother. I can't imagine what my mom feels like when I was a child. I'm like, what does this menu say? And she couldn't answer. And that passes on to later the children and so on. So I worked with YANA-Dwight to coordinate with the ESL team and to make sure that tutors are retained, that they don't just leave. I've tried to build a ESL program before when I came to the US and saw that my mom was struggling, and I knew that she had other friends that she had met who were also struggling with English. So I knew how hard it was, and not everyone can do it. I don't know if you guys have tried, but 1 hour is like a whole week it's really hard, and it makes you like resent the work even. And so to feel that Dwight Hall appreciated that work, that even though it might not be like I'm not moving, mountains, I'm contributing maybe in very small ways, but Dwight Hall still really appreciated that. I think that's restored my faith in public service. And today's world, I'm always thinking, like, why am I doing any of this? This is so little. It's not making that much of an impact. But when I see people like you guys and people who are on the screen who are interested and who have spent years doing this work and are still here to help younger people accomplish the goals in public service that they want, it's really, I think it restores my faith a little bit, and it makes me, I think, comfortable to go into social and public work. Because I come from a low-income family, and I also want to make money for myself. So to know that there are people who support this work is very, very exciting. And for, as Mark said, the long-term impact of this fellowship, I think I had one of the most life-changing summers this past summer, especially with this funding. I had this opportunity to teach these women who were newly arrived in the US and who had daughters who were, I would say, practically forgotten about. We like to focus on maybe the older women and trying to give them driver's licenses and everything, but we forget about maybe like the 13, 14, 15-year-old. So I'm working with a group of Yale students to try and make like a community well-being, almost mental health type thing where we bring younger girls who are in New Haven public schools to come and speak to each other, talk to each other, paint, and make bracelets or anything, to get them to talk about their feelings and get them to recognize that they're not alone in their experience. And also, while doing the ESL program, I got inspired and started doing with another organization as well, teaching girls in Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Iran who were displaced. And I met these two girls who were Afghan girls, who were both 16, who were just amazing. They logged into class like 5 minutes early and talked to me, and it would be like a Saturday and I just had a really long week and I'd wake up at 9 a.m. But then I would hop onto this meeting and these girls just so thirsty for education. I was humbled. And so these two girls, I started mentoring them into applying to boarding schools in the US since they're not allowed to go to school in Afghanistan. And this started in the summer, and now they're here in the US. They're in Utah. They have full scholarships. They have host families, a whole community in Utah who are ready to take them in whenever they need. We raised over $50,000 in 2 weeks, which was just insane. I had no idea. Yeah, they're doing great. Their grades are amazing. One wants to be wants to do physics. So really loves physics. I can't understand, but she's just doing awesome. And the other one's really interested in business for social impact. And I've taken them under my wing, so they're also helping me with the work that we're doing. And we just had another girl who got accepted to the College of the Holy Cross, full scholarship. Took a long time, but we got there. And I think I've also been able to rally a lot of Yale students to this cause. And I've had, I think, Kelton, I've had Nilab and so many other people that I have directed towards Dwight Hall who have now are asking me questions about the application. I'm like, okay, do this. So
You can ask me too.
I think I'm better to approach. So yeah, and Dwight Hall has just really created such a warm community of people who are so interested in public service and all the other fellowship websites. And
You're on the review committee now, by the way.
Yeah, it's so nice to walk into Dwight Hall as well. I got so inspired that I have like now registered my little organization under Dwight Hall. So we're under Dwight Hall now, and we get access to all the funding. And I don't think any of this would have been possible without the funding that I received that appreciated my work, not only addressed my needs like food and whatnot, but it appreciated me, and because it's not easy work. And yeah. Thank you.
Okay, that's a hard act to follow. One of the things that you've all touched on is that, Dwight Hall creates a home or a container. And I think it's important to clarify that students come to Dwight Hall knowing what they, at least to our fellowship, knowing what they want to do. It's not a placement thing. It sounds like you might have had a little bit of that organically there, but that there's going to be a big gap this year because first gen, which was doing a lot of matching, is not going to be able to do that anymore. So we're trying to figure out between YANA and Dwight Hall as well, how we might.
Repeat that?
Sure. So there's an organization called First Gen, and they, for the last 5 years, have been doing an incredible job of helping FGLI students get internships and placements for summer. I think it's primarily summer, right? And by publishing to the Yale community, would you like a student, and having that job description, and then having the students be able to come to that job board, as it were, and helping. They vetted, Rachel can probably speak to this a little bit better, but they were vetting students and helping match. And then, like, we've had at YANA, we've had 3 of those interns in the summer, and they also help them figure out whether they're eligible for the summer experience or other funding as well. They're not doing that anymore because it got too big and they needed staff, and they couldn't do it based on 2 volunteers anymore. Anyway, so we're trying to figure out how we can also help with that. But in terms of the YANA-Dwight Hall Fellowships, students already have their placement. They might have been already doing some work with an organization, and then they use the YANA-Dwight Hall or the Dwight Hall Fellowships to be able to support their efforts in the summer. I wanted to just take 1 second, because this year, for the very first time, we have a YANA-Dwight Hall committee, and the members are, most of them are on the call or in the room. So I wanted to just recognize Andrew, who also sits on the YANA board, and Mary Beth and Katie and Josiah, who are all here, and they're going to be putting their shoulders to the grindstone. We're also going to be having an on-campus YANA-Dwight Hall event at the end of March, to talk about what, more in the universe of New Haven and that area. So anyway, you all touched also on this, which is this, you mentioned that, Mark, I think we heard eloquently from Hamid, but you mentioned that, obviously they often have a very big impact on careers. And over the years, if you can think back, what are some of the most compelling success stories that you've seen from students who participated, and how did those shape their careers?
Great question. So the first one that comes to mind, there's this balance between what is somebody's long-term career success and what's their sort of immediate career success. So how pointed are people when they leave school? Do they know that they want to go to law school? Or what's the experience that they definitely want to have? I'm thinking of Patrick Hayes, who, Rachel, I'm sure you remember Patrick Hayes. Patrick applied twice and actually was not eligible for YANA-Dwight Hall Summer Fellows the second time because he had gotten it in the previous year. So this was a student who was frequently committed to federal defender work, did work in Texas, and I was thinking about who are the students that I remember, and I was checking in on like some of these names, and he is in a federal defender's office in Chicago right now. So he is just a student that comes to mind as having a very clear, like a very clear direction and desire for, and he found these opportunities on his own, but really also knew, like, okay, after having this experience, one of the things that's very possible is crossing something off the list. If you have a summer placement or you have a summer job and you do it and you don't like it, okay, I know that I don't want to go that route. This is a student who, when he did it, it was immediately counted in, like, oh, this is exactly the kind of work that I want to do. And his summer in Texas was not easy. It was,
Sure,
things were dissolved while he was there. He wasn't sure if his supervisor was going to have a job by the end of his time there. There were all sorts of things that were changing around him, but there was a part of that experience that made him more committed to doing the work in the future. So that's just the first student that comes to
There are all
mind.
kinds of reasons why you might not have chosen to pursue that.
Yeah. Well,
Another person, of course, is Marwan, who was not able to join us tonight, but Marwan grew up in Syria, and his family was displaced by the civil war. I think they moved to Turkey, and then eventually, through Scandinavia, I think Sweden. And the family was kind of spread out. He ended up coming to the States, coming to Yale entirely on his own, and was newly proficient in English. He was learning English basically while he was, you know, a freshman. He also couldn't leave the country because of his visa status. So he had very little contact with, I mean, he had some contact with his family, but essentially was entirely on his own in this new country. And he was one of the first YANA fellows that we sponsored, who did a dual placement where he was placed in an organization in the East Coast and then later out in the Bay Area. He was a spectacular student, very, very committed to the causes that he cared about. Was awarded a prestigious fellowship. Rhodes.
He's a Rhodes Scholar.
Did work at Oxford, has graduated that and is now back in the States. And I would say that that fellowship absolutely changed the trajectory, and he's doing what he's doing now largely because at that young age where he was, you know, not really sure what to do with the summer, he did that, and it really changed everything.
Do you remember his housing situation that summer?
Yes.
So this Hamida story is, that's why I tell people that the best part of my job is saying yes to Yale students, because I could connect those dots, but I didn't know a lot of that. So like it's great to hear those kinds of things. With Marwan, I remember being in the Dwight Hall library, and I think that it was over reunion weekend.
Yeah. We have an
And-
open house during reunion. We encourage people to stop by and to share their stories with their Dwight Hall experience.
And Marwan was there, and he was talking to an alum and happened to mention where they were. Oh, I have connections there. Oh, I live in that area, and ended up staying at the person's house over the course of the summer. And it just kind of happened to be the person happened to be in New Haven and stopped by Dwight Hall for this little bit of time and happened to be standing next to Marwan. And it led to this sort of very unique relationship that, like we're sort of imposing, it's very much a unique opportunity that who knows where it's going to take students to go to. So I love that about YANA-Dwight Hall Summer Fellows specifically, is the desire that I've always heard from Rachel, Lisa, to connect with students and figuring out how can we use YANA's network to really support these students in the work that they're doing. I'm not expecting people to put up students in their homes, but I do think that being able to connect to this network of people, whether they're going into their summer or after they graduate, I think that that's really part of what's so inspiring about kind of YANA and the folks that are here tonight.
Well, that was the next question I was going to ask, which was how alumni made a difference in the growth and sustainability of the fellowship, and what can we do more as a community to expand its reach. And the obvious one is the more funding that we have, the more
Fellows, you can have.
the more fellows that, although I really think we have to change the name, you know, because I mean, if you're not a freshman anymore, I don't think you should be a fellow, you know? Sorry, did you know?
Okay.
There are no freshmen anymore, they're first years. No freshmen, because that's man, right? So it's a first year. So there are no freshman counselors either. What are they called?
Well, they're called FROCOs and
Froco.
so
Froco.
because this
I thought it was like
in this climate of language policing, it isn't true that freshmen is not permitted. It's that it's encouraged to use first year.
And I support that. I'm just saying, you know, I've been tripping over fellow lately, but anyhow, that we can, you know, Kristen and I talked about, we have this dream that anybody who wanted to do something in the summer would be able to be funded, right? Which would, you know, how big is that universe? And the summer experience kind of gives us a sense of that. But you know, in terms of additional things, rather in addition to donating, which, as Ken told you, is very simple, very easy to do on the link.
A question about.
Sure.
So one of the things I was curious about is there, so I don't know how many Dwight Hall Fellows and then YANA-Dwight Hall Fellows that exist in the universe. Do you have some kind of Facebook group? Is there some way that you collect all the alum that have been in this very specific group and that they then talk to each other and iterate beyond?
Well, that's interesting. Like post experience
Yeah.
community.
Yeah, of course.
Um,
How many people have
Just did one this year.
No, not an event. I'm talking about like a connected group that is ongoing, like even if it's as simple as a private Facebook group. So how many people have been Dwight Hall Fellows in the last 50, I don't know how many years are, like total?
Since, all right, so
500.
Okay.
yes, I think it's
There are
732
yana.
32, yeah.
But
So,
32 yana.
so it seems to me like one of the after action things in terms of keeping, you know, I do other kinds of leadership, but like your list is the most important tool that you have.
Mhm.
It's one of the most important tools you have. Whether there's somebody who's 25 years out or 5 years out. And it seems like one of the things for the strength of it and to be self-iterative is to, I mean, literally something as simple as a private Facebook group. I mean, Facebook, we have a bunch of WhatsApp in the alumni now. 500 is a little big to have it in the WhatsApp group, but it seems like that group of alumna might be a great way for them to talk to each other.
Yeah.
That's
And
great.
that there's really good synergy. Like you may have somebody that you know is 5 years out that's in a place that you want to be, but you wouldn't know that they existed if they weren't in that group.
Yeah.
The
Like,
power of the alumni.
are good too. I think there's a feature that you can create a group on LinkedIn and then you can.
Yeah, LinkedIn groups are on,
Jobs
that's actually,
listing.
yeah, LinkedIn group might be actually even more
Yeah,
effective.
I'm trying to think through like the best, so we use Salesforce to kind of just keep track
Yeah,
of stuff. So we know who all of our fellows are. We,
But that's you keeping
Yeah,
track
yeah,
of
yeah,
them
yeah,
as opposed to them interacting with each
yeah,
other.
yeah. I couldn't do Facebook. Like, so they're like, there's
Somebody else can.
I'll say this, that there are natural limitations that we have. LinkedIn, Barbara Mola, who's our communications person, has created like a stronger LinkedIn profile. And I think it's a great idea to create smaller groups or communities within whatever the platform is that really makes sense. I love that idea. I think one of the things that I don't like, so I've been around for a little bit over 10 years. I oftentimes see students that will start something that doesn't have like the legs to stay. And that's not what this would be at all, but whatever it is something that is a commitment to be sustained to. So it's the kind of thing like if First Gen Yale did something incredible where they solicited opportunities and solicited students and said, hey, go find some funding. I think that it would be irresponsible to rush into replacing it unless you're going to commit to doing it.
Oh,
for a
I'm not
long
talking
term.
about.
Yeah.
I know, but I'm just using that as my,
You have one problem over here that you have
Yeah,
to replace. And but it's just interesting enough, I mean,
yeah,
the First Gen Yale group on Facebook is enormous.
yeah.
And very powerful.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, the only reason that I'm using that as an
Yeah, no,
example
it's-
is like because like it could be LinkedIn groups or whatever it is. I don't even know how that stuff works. And Barbara could like think through how that sort of thing goes, and we can send an invitation out. But I would want to make sure that it's useful for all the different parties that are doing it. And 10 years from now, I want that to be like it needs to be automatic entry into whatever.
Right, I mean, that's really what it is, usually at least Facebook and
Yeah.
LinkedIn, there's usually one or two admins.
Right, I thought Tim was gonna.
Oh, I'm Tim. I'm on the Dwight Hall board, and I just want to say thank you to YANA for enabling so many students to do this. And one of the things that's not a financial thing that we've also seen happen informally, but there might be more opportunities, is just the combination of mentoring and job matching. So that, but a little bit more by category, like people are interested in law or people are interested in in sort of mental health work or international development, you know, creating sort of buckets of categories where, hey, there's people in your network that are interested in those things who might be interested in hiring a really great person, you know, who is, you know, has been a fellow. And then, of course, the students are going to be looking for like a permanent position as well. And just to continuing to develop that connective tissue, either about a specific job or just, hey, here are people that can be literally be a mentor beyond the specific fellowship program.
I agree. Even if there's no like direct interaction between the mentor and the student, just seeing their job title, I think makes it so much easier because I'll be honest, I don't know what kind of jobs are in the public service. I know like you can work in the government, maybe nonprofit, but what are those specific job titles that maybe that I'm interested in? I really want to do work in international development, but I couldn't tell you a single title about what a person who would work in that does. So even seeing like alumni's job title would be like the best thing ever. There's such a guidance.
And that's the thing. I mean, that's what YANA is all about, connecting, catalyzing, and convening. And so at least we could do a pilot project with our YANA fellows, right? Because there's only 32 of them so far. But we really think that this is an opportunity. And then there's, you know, the Venn diagram of all the other opportunities at Yale, and Josiah Brown in the chat has been reminding us that, you know, there's also cross campus for mentoring and how that fits. And, you know, I mean, there's a vast universe of need and not a vast supply. So there's a plenty of territory there to go around. But another way in which we're all figuring out how to intersect. Question from the chat. What is the timeline for job matching each year so we as alums can keep this in mind with our organization and those in our networks?
This is for summer opportunities.
Yes.
We usually begin to advertise opportunities toward the end of the fall semester so that students who are beginning now to think about what's next, particularly, you know, they're probably their mom or their dad's like, so I know you're doing exams, but have you thought about the summer? And other opportunities are being advertised also, like travel abroad and, you know, research opportunities and things like that. So we want to make sure that at least the knowledge of what's available is being put out around there. Applications usually open up in
Our application? It can be as early as the beginning of December,
so
typically.
one of the things that students struggle with is they might say, I'm interested in housing, or I'm interested in mental health, or interested in whatever sector, but they don't know where to go or what's available. They can apply for things, fellowships and things like that, but one of the things they're going to need is ultimately an agreement letter, a letter from the place where they're going to be working, saying that we are committing to working with this person. Often they need that in order to secure the fellowship. So if they don't know what
To be considered for the fellowship.
so we've had students that we encouraged all along the way who applied for things, and we were not able even to give them a summer fellowship because they couldn't get that letter of commitment from it because they didn't have someone on the other end. So that's an area where alumni can be really helpful if they know of places that are looking. So we just went through this really great, somewhat laborious process with the United Nations Development Program to create opportunities for students to work alongside these different teams that are working all in what's the grouping? It's good government.
Yeah, there's like
Rule of law and I forget.
peace building.
Peace building, right. This is a great opportunity because the UN's looking for people. They have really great work that they need students to work on. And students who are applying were like really excited because this is very concrete stuff they could imagine doing. That's actually working in these offices.
Talking about it.
Yeah. And the only limitation of that is money. I mean, we said, let's buy 4 of them. And then when they shared it to the different teams, they're like, we want 5 each. That would have been like 20 or something.
Yeah, that's 9.
So now we ended up admitting 9. And with the federal government now not being a likely place that people are going to find employment, this could be a great alternative. So
To answer that question, what's the timeline? For an unpaid internship, the latest that a student could get funding is pretty much May 1st. So theoretically, people could look for a student that is still eligible for the SEA, find a student, and hope that that student does all the things. Okay, that is certainly an option. The probably more preferred timeline, but we have found that this is not necessarily one that works with nonprofit timeline, is closer to the beginning of December, which is when students start using something, the Yale Simplicity system, which is where you could go to find job postings. Anytime after the beginning of December is, I think some students may have already found things. But if you are looking, if a student is looking within the social sector, it's very routine that it's sort of, that there is an application and then an interview and selection process, which is part of the consideration for how much time do people really need. To give students every opportunity to receive funding from the university, they should probably receive the offer mid-February. It is probably the right timeline so that they can then say, okay, I know that I have this placement secured. Where can I go get funding for this thing now? And they can spread out the application to a few different places during midterm season.
And this is one of the reasons why the gravitational pull toward finance consulting is so much stronger, because that those industries know how many people they're going to select for the summer internship at Goldman or McKinsey. So they can start recruiting on campus really early.
In fall.
Whereas how many nonprofits know more than 6 months out whether they could actually take someone on, for a summer thing. And also the golden opportunity for those internships is that if it's after your junior year, that by the end of the summer you have a job offer. So you go into your senior year knowing you've got a job waiting for you when you graduate. No nonprofit can say, a year and a half in advance, yeah, I'll hire you when you graduate. So we have to work against those realities.
Any other questions in the room? I have another comment from the chat. So from the chat, a suggestion about the conversation of connecting the fellows is to use a listserv to facilitate communication. Someone would need to administer it, but it would not need a lot of active oversight and would be inherently more protective of privacy than LinkedIn or Facebook.
To use what?
Listserv.
As a student, I won't be downloading anything that I don't already have. So if it takes work.
Well, it's an email. Isn't that what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Get the emails. Yes. Unless you want, unless you're not checking that email.
Yeah.
Anita, what do you think would make the biggest difference? And now that you're trying to think about what you want to, what kind of job trajectory you could be on for your career goals, what would make the biggest difference to you in over the next few months to be able to identify a potential job?
Yeah. I had big dreams for this summer of interning at USAID. So it's a little sad. I had a friend who was interning there last summer, and she told me great things about it. And I also went to a USAID funded school in Afghanistan. I owe really everything and where I am today, where I'm sitting today, to USAID. So I really wanted to work there. So now I'm hoping to probably study abroad and do a project on the ground. I'm hoping to go to Jordan studying Arabic. So I know there's a lot of room for public service work there. So yeah. Maybe field work. I really do want suggestions for field work, and I think it's so daunting to go look at the UN page and or even like Peace Corps or any like Teach for America, those websites. Like actual field work would be beneficial, and I think it really also would translate really well for long-term goals, because you'll be in the position of the people who will be receiving your help. So it's a great way to put people in places where they would have to come up for solutions.
Okay, future of the fellowship, as the need for financial support among students continues to grow, what is your vision for the future of the fellowship? I share a little bit of ours. How can we work toward a future where no qualified student is turned away? I mean, assuming you got that letter, that placement letter anyway.
So right now, because we're an independent affiliated entity, if you want to make a donation to Yale to support any of the activities or to support students doing things to Dwight Hall, it doesn't count. And in fact, the Yale Development Office isn't really encouraging people to make donations that are outside the university, which technically we are. What would really change is that if the university, if people wanted to fund these scholarship opportunities as a donation to Yale that they got credit for to support these student experiences, I think that would bring a lot.
I know there's new leadership. Would Yale ever respond to like a challenge where like if YANA said, hey, look, we'll fund 5 if Yale funds 5 in addition, beyond the OSA or whatever the existing program.
What I've seen in the past is that when a large enough amount of money is offered or proffered, the university usually responds, but not always. So I don't know if you followed the whole saga of the alumni support for the a new swimming pool for the swim team. The university has resisted very, very strongly this alumni group that has raised a lot of money. They have a lot of influence because they don't want to go in that direction. So Yale does have enough advantage, monetary advantage that it can say no. But I think when you find opportunities that's where the interests align, it's more often it's done around a campaign. So for example, when Slivka needed to renovate the building, one of the ways that to help them raise the money was Yale agreed that for this limited amount of time, you could raise money in this way. So I think there are ways in which it could be done, and it would probably entail a conversation with YANA representatives, with the development office, and saying, how can we make this work?
And the other thing is that sometimes there are people who actually sorry, I should not say this, right? They don't want to give to Yale, but they want to support the students. And so, doing that through YANA and Dwight Hall is an opportunity. But then if they wanted to count for their class gifts, it doesn't, so that. Anybody else? Do you want to get Kristen on?
Kristen.
It's time.
Kristen's in San Francisco. How about a few words, Kristen?
Sure. First of all, just want to say thank you so much to the team at Dwight Hall for not just coming down to New York and spending the evening with us, but for, the years of partnership and helping to allow a channel for the folks in our network to support the students on campus. And also a very special thank you to students who have taken this journey with us, and for Luma for sharing your story. It's really inspiring, and I'm really sorry to hear about the impacts on from USAID on kind of where we were expected to go this summer. But know that there's a community here, and even further who wants to make sure that you and others are able to connect and follow your dreams. And I think the thing that is so kind of important, and why we're all here in the room together, is really wanting to ensure that, going back to what Lisa was saying at the top of our time together, that there are continuing to clear pathways for what it means to take a career into social impact. I know that when I stepped on Yale's campus back in 1999, that a lot of folks around me were going into careers of medicine, law, consulting, things that were very clear to my parents. But whenever I said I wanted to support the environment and work on solving climate change, that was not very clear to my parents or my family. So this community is helping to clear the way so that students can test out different social impact careers, be able to have a really meaningful summer, and be able to have those conversations with people in their lives back home about what it means to live a life and leverage their Yale education towards giving back. So just wanting to remind us all of that. We have a lot of work ahead of us. I'm really excited to share sort of in closing that we are 80% of the way to our goal to being able to support 6 students for sure this summer. So I know we have some folks in the room who have supported us already. Andrew, Josiah, Lisa, others who I can't see everyone who's on the room. Thank you. I believe we can support 6 students. I also am kind of hopeful that we can support 7 or even 8. So our fundraising campaign is going on through the end of March. And if you can and are able to give, there's really no gift too small nor too large. It all comes together to help us be able to support these students and following their passion, because these, I believe deeply that if all of us continue to follow our dreams and our goals and making the world a better place, it's exactly what we need to be able to address the big issues that we're facing right now across a whole host of issues. So I will leave it there. Thank you again to Dwight Hall, the team, Lisa for hosting, and everyone for coming to learn more about this really important partnership. And looking forward to hopefully being able to communicate out at the end of next month that we not only surpassed our goal, but are actually being able to help more.
Can I just add one thing? I don't know if any other alumni experiences, but sometimes when we've been in the field, it can, especially times like this, it can feel a little hopeless. And the reason I've been on Dwight Hall's board, the reason why I think the fellowships are so important is because, I get a lot of hope when I hear people that are like starting their careers with a sense of like, we can change things and we will change things. So thank you for supporting that.
What are you laughing at?
I was waiting for you to address the room, but I'm glad you addressed Anita.
Thought we were finished. What he's laughing at, I just said, I have some ideas for you.
Good.
Okay, thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
Peter, Amita, and Mark, thank you.
Yeah.